Welcome to Sex Talk Radio, a podcast that explores sex, kink, and intimacy through candid conversations with sex workers, researchers, and voices shaping the conversations on sexuality. This episode is brought to you by Testy, a sexual health company I founded launching early 2026, which will revolutionize same-day walk-in STI testing. Head to testy.co to get on the waitlist and get a discount on your first panel. I'm excited to share my conversation with Kaytlin Bailey with you all today. I saw her one-woman show twice here in New York City, and I had to have her on because of how much I learned about the history of sex work, and I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. Kaytlin Bailey is a performer, podcast host, and sex worker rights advocate. She is the host of the Oldest Profession podcast, where every episode is a deep dive into a different sex worker from history. She is currently touring her one-woman show, The Oldest Profession, a hilarious mad dash through 10,000 years of history from a sex worker's perspective. She is also the founder and executive director of Old Pros, a nonprofit media organization that uses storytelling to advocate for sex worker rights.
In Nevada, for example, if you want to work as a legally licensed sex worker, you have to register with the sheriff's department. That becomes a subpoenable thing about you for the rest of your life. You can imagine how this comes up in like child custody cases, for example, right? When you work at a brothel, you are not allowed to leave the premises.
Kaytlin Bailey, welcome to Sex Talk Radio.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm super happy
delighted to be here.
Yes, you are amazing.
Thank you.
I have seen your show twice now.
Yes, I was like, oh, you've seen my show.
I'm trying to recruit
2 times. Yeah.
It's amazing. And I'm trying to bring sex workers and just people that I'm like, this is a really important part of the story that people are trying to share right now.
Thank you.
So, really quick, I usually don't have people plug at the beginning, but what is your show called and where can people find you?
So my show is called The Oldest Profession, and I cover 10,000 years of history from a sex worker's perspective in 75 minutes, and it's hilarious.
She does. It is. The humor's really important.
Thank you. I've been a stand-up comic for more than 16 years now, so That is my professional background.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and you also have art history background, right?
History.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
We do images, so I depend on art historians. But my undergraduate degree was in history, and I wrote my sort of like capstone thesis on the economic structure of brothels between 1890 and 1920 in Charleston, South Carolina.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, there's a lot of places I think we're going to go today. I am also very much intrigued by the history of sex work. The first audiobook I ever downloaded was about like a madame at a brothel. And I was like a teenager, but for some reason I was like, this is fascinating because it feels like it's sex and power and money. And it's like, why? Like, it just felt like the most interesting thing possible to me.
Right. We're sold this story that like we didn't have like voting power until 1920. Right. We didn't have economic power until property rights, coverture is ended and 18 or like we don't get access to credit cards until like 1976. We don't have access to like reproductive power meaningfully until 1973. I mean, like there are these sort of moments, and sex workers are an exception to all of that. We have found ways to own our own businesses, to control whether or when we become mothers, to build, to make money, to leave abusive relationships, for literally all of human history. And I think that's fascinating. And it's a part of the story that is really glossed over and left out.
Right. It's like they're the original rebels. Like sex workers have always been like, I'm not going to do it that way.
You can't have a patriarchy in a society that doesn't know who the dads are.
Wait, can you explain that a little bit?
So, patriarchy means that power, property goes through the paternal line, right? If you don't know who the dads are, right, then power, status goes through the maternal line because it doesn't matter how many people I have sex with. I just know it's my baby. Sex workers, promiscuous women, women that, do not adhere to the rules of chastity, it's impossible for us to participate really in or be contained in the same way by the patriarchal order. That's why we're such an existential threat.
Yes. obsessed and focused on sex work and trans people and people that are like some of the smallest percentages of people. I mean, there are a lot of sex workers,
sure,
much more than trans people, but just
I think there'd be more sex workers and trans people if stigma were different.
Yes,
but
but like the government's obsession with certain categories when it's really not a big piece of the pie at all.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your own story getting into sex work and what that looked like, and
Sure. So I got into sex work from a place of privilege and curiosity, right? I come from a middle-class background. I'm an only child, the officer's daughter, raised on military bases until, my dad retired. And then we moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, which is where I started in like 2004, 2005 during this what I now recognize as like a golden age of sex work where, it was like when you could access the internet and there were all of these message boards and sex workers and clients could like connect and share information with each other. But before smartphones and surveillance technology and the dystopian nightmare that we're in the process of creating now. So we didn't know how good we had it. But I found this message board. I read the FAQ, or frequently asked questions segment. I understood the safety protocols that were laid out for me.
Yeah.
And I connected to a community of people that were using a new technology to do a very old thing. After getting a lay of the land and sort of seeing and watching and learning what other people were doing, I started my own like free Yahoo account. I don't know how much that dates me. I already said it was 2004.
I had one too. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, of course. That's how it was done.
Alaskan Girl, like 92.
Yes. Right. Remember we were
Please don't email that.
Right. Yes. God knows where it will go.
Right.
Yeah, so I set up my email account. I posted my ad with my like screening protocol clearly articulated.
Where were ads posted at that time?
It was I don't want to say the name of the site because it was it's embarrassing.
Oh, okay.
But it was it was a nice local site that was doing its best.
Was there what led you to that board originally? Have you always had a curiosity?
I've been obsessed with sex workers from history from jump. I've been reading about like bad girls from history from the beginning, which of course naturally led me to courtesans, madams, sex workers. So I searched like escort Raleigh, North Carolina, and stumbled onto this community. And then again, because this was before SESTA FOSTA, because this was before a lot of the constraints, the safety protocols were really just clearly articulated.
What did that look like? Like, was it the same for everyone?
So there was a very explicit expectation of protected everything, right? Like condom use for or all of it. There's no kind of unprotected sex.
Okay.
The screening practices were very clearly articulated. So clients knew that they were expected to give their real name, that they were expected to show their ID, that they were expected to reveal the name, the stage name and contact information of other providers that they had seen, and that they were expected to have interactions with, providers that led to good references. So it was a very, it was kind of a self-enforcing system.
Checks and balances.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and it was a very communicative community, So if somebody had a bad experience, once you were verified as an independent provider, which took another independent provider sort of vouching for you, right? Which usually involved them like taking you out to lunch and making eye contact and making sure that you were like, whatever, which was fun.
Which is cool because that's how it seems like it's been for so many years, hundreds of years,
thousands of years, right?
Like word of mouth and connection and vetting and
absolutely.
It's very ancient.
I mean,
it's cool.
Sex work is a craft and it adheres to the same basic rules of like apprenticeship, journeyman, mastery of any other craft. And it takes mentorship and guidance and instruction and like criminalization and isolation and removing, this stuff from the internet really prevents a lot of that. It doesn't prevent people from doing it, but it prevents people from accessing the tools that they need to do it safely and consciously.
Absolutely.
So I remember I got taken out to lunch by the sex worker that I admired.
Yeah.
She verified me, and that gave me access to the back end where bad date lists were shared, more explicit safety tips, and also tips on like how to get tips, and other tips of the trade were shared. Yeah.
Were deposits a part of the process?
You mean before bookings?
Yeah.
No, this was a cash only. It was
got it.
An unacknowledged but visible envelope on the table was the way that it was done. And so you usually counted the money after the appointment was done, which meant that if you were shorted, then that's how you ended up on a bad date list, or that's how a complaint was filed, or that's how you got like blacklisted within the community.
Yeah, it seems different now. It seems like a lot of electronic money being sent and deposits, which means you're paying all the taxes and all that
it creates
stuff.
a different
and a lot
level
of
of risk.
Paper trail. Yeah. So what was do you remember your first kind of appointment or session or
You know, I say in the show, everyone's different for like when that like identity shift happens.
Kind of stepping into that
stepping into that role. And for me, I something big shifted for me the moment that I, got the gumption to post my first ad, because everything that happened after that was really the result of that choice.
Yeah.
And so
big decision.
Yeah.
Some of those things can't be hidden or removed, or it's a very final thing in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it felt final. And also I'm just the kind of person that like does what I say I'm going to do. And so like the follow through it felt like a given to me. Like it just didn't feel like something where I was going to.
It was more profound for you to post than
it was more profound for me to post than it was for me to walk through that door.
Sure.
Yeah. And so, I got dozens, I think maybe even 100 emails.
Oh, wow.
Which
I do not think it's like that anymore either.
Yeah. I mean, it's very funny. Like thinking back, I really, the industry goes through, these ebbs and flows, but it really was a golden age.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. And it put me in the driver's seat, in the power position. Like I was looking for reasons to turn people down, right? Like you didn't fulfill my screening criteria. No, I'm not going back and forth with you asking for things that I, said initially. I treated it like a job application.
Sure.
It's
high standards.
Yeah. I didn't like your tone. Whatever.
That's how I treat dating.
Exactly. It really,
unmatched.
It felt like that. And, I want to acknowledge that a huge part of that was that I didn't have bills to pay, right? I didn't have a habit to support. I was coming from a place of all of my needs being
family to
met.
provide for.
None of that.
Yeah. It's a privilege to be able to screen to that degree.
100%. You know, like I was juggling a lot of things. I was a busy, like student with like extracurriculars and like friends to see. But I wanted to do this thing. And so the guy sort of felt like just an accident of circumstance, right? Like he won the lottery in terms of like the person that was my first appointment. And I remember my expectations because I'd been building up this fantasy in my head for a long time, right? Based on movies and books and fantasy
Pretty
novels.
Woman.
Right, exactly.
That's my favorite movie.
Or even like, 19th century courtesan tales. So I really...
In our lavish palace. Oh, it's just a room at the Marriott. Like
literally that.
Yeah.
So I like brought a costume.
One might.
Right, but it wasn't like a fantasy play session. It was like just
You were excited.
I was excited. So I'm like way overdressed for this like Hilton or whatever was happening. And this guy was like very sweet.
Oh.
Remember he put porn on, which I thought was like an interesting choice. And the session was like relatively short. And then I remember, at like as a teenager, sort of being shocked and like not exactly insulted, but just like a little like taken aback and didn't quite know what to do. And he was like, okay.
And he was done.
We're done. Right. And I was like, you have 50 minutes left, sir. You did not want to hang out and enjoy the
get
pleasure.
To know me?
Right.
A men's psychic change after orgasm. I really should. I think more research should go. Not that more research needs to go to men, but like it is fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
How they go from all right, we're done here.
Yep. So I remember I got in my car, turned the music up real loud, was driving like a little too fast, was like on an adrenaline high.
Oh no.
And I'd had like these crisp $100 bills, which was burning a hole in my pocket. And I pulled over and I walked into this like joint and ordered like a Diet Coke because I was not yet 21 and had this bartender like break 100 and just felt like high on adrenaline and new experience.
Yeah.
I felt very powerful.
I think that there's something about being paid for your time when, at least like for me, dating can feel really humiliating. Like regular vanilla dating can feel really humiliating. And the disrespect and the ghosting and the like, hey, do you want to like maybe go grab a drink? I mean, it's like regular vanilla dating feels quite insulting often.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. It's like society has the wrong gauge of what is humiliating here with sex work and modern dating.
Yeah, whereas like as a sex worker, I felt like a queen where I was like compete for my time, you know, like
And you're gonna pay me for my time.
Yeah. Pay to compete for my attention.
Yeah. I would say that I have a biased tendency to focus on like the really exciting, fun, lavish parts of sex worker history.
Sure.
And so, I would love to talk a little bit about, the privilege and the hard parts. Mm-hmm. And I would also like for us at some point today to talk about the very important distinction between, consensual sex work and trafficking too, because they often get conflated. So we can jump in wherever you want there.
Yeah. I mean, the upper echelons of sex work are like most history, the more well-documented parts of sex work, right? Because these are the people who were keeping journals. These are the people whose history is maintained in the same way that like we know the story of kings in the way that we don't know the story of peasants, the same forces of history. And I think that's an analysis that's really important to bring to the way that we think and talk about sex work, is that this is actually not a special or a unique thing. Like, all of labor exists on a spectrum of choice, circumstance, and coercion. And sex work is no exception to that. Like, there are waitresses that love their job, right? There are sommeliers and people that work at, incredible places that have made careers and, bought themselves homes by, being in the service industry. And there are people whose passports have been taken who are beaten regularly and coerced into doing things that hurt their body and soul.
Yeah.
In the food and bev industry.
Yes.
That full spectrum exists in sex work. And so
chills. Yeah.
So I think that like we can talk about gender-based violence, which is not unique to sex work, but exists in sex work. And we can talk about labor exploitation, which exists in sex work, but is not unique to sex work. But we have to acknowledge that we are not going to get to a more just, equitable, less violent future by trying to eradicate the oldest profession. Prostitution has become a symbol of all of these things that we're too afraid to face. But the unfortunate and uncomfortable reality that too many people are not willing to face is that these monsters are everywhere. And I think the Epstein, scandal is like too tame a word, but
I don't know what to call it either. It's fucking horrific.
Revelation is
that's a good one.
A great opportunity for us to look at the gap between the story we tell ourselves about like what trafficking looks like the movie Taken, and what trafficking actually looks like. Because these guys were never going to get caught in a John sting. Because they weren't looking for adult consensual sex workers.
They
were looking for children. Yeah.
Yes.
Epstein.
Yes.
You were never
going to catch.
You were never going to catch Epstein or any of his ilk or whatever by arresting people by like this way that so.
Do you want to explain what a John sting is?
Oh yeah.
We got
sorry.
lots of
course, absolutely. So the way that so many like anti-trafficking operations, right? Like. What was the famous one they used to do every summer? Like the thing that happens around the Super Bowl, right? These like, Operation Rescue Kids or whatever. What that actually looks like is police officers LARPing as consensual adult sex workers, right? Posting ads.
Oh, as women?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they post ads on the sites that adult consensual sex workers were using, luring men who think that they are about to pay a professional for advertised services.
That's fucking absurd.
And then they arrest them and they frame
How is that finding trafficking victims?
It's not.
At all.
It only makes sense in a world where we've conflated adult consensual sex work with trafficking, which we have. And I think the Epstein case, again, is a really clear case of this, right?
Yes.
In both directions, right? Not only are we not going to catch these guys by doubling down on the criminalization of sex work, but also when we arrested Epstein the first time for child trafficking, right? He was arrested for grooming a 14-year-old girl and I think like a handful of other victims. I think the age range was like 14 to 17. What was he charged with?
Trafficking, right?
Prostitution. Soliciting. Yeah.
But they were minor. Like
they're conflated in the minds of, right. Yes. And like, of course, this is an example of corruption. Of course, this is an example of privilege, but that conflation hurts adult consensual sex workers because the criminalization hurts that, but it also hurts survivors. All of these girls were maligned as whores.
Prostitutes.
When, of course, they were
groomed
victims.
and coerced into assault is what was happening.
Yes.
Yeah. I would also like to talk a little bit on this note about these like anti-trafficking organizations and FOSTA SESTA. Maybe you could speak to somebody that's like never even heard of FOSTA SESTA. And what these kind of, in my opinion, like a lot of these are like phony alt-right backed anti-trafficking things. And they also want porn removed. And like it's, would love
absolutely.
your expertise on that.
Yeah, I mean, the alliance between like anti-sex work, anti-porn, like we call them sort of like radical or carceral feminists and like extreme religious organizations that are really interested in stripping women of their property rights, freedom of movement, bodily autonomy, and like hunting homosexuals is a long and dangerous alliance that goes back to the Seneca Falls Convention of 1840, right? Like, white carceral feminists have been getting into bed with misogynistic religious leaders to focus on making life harder for sex workers for over 100 years. This flares up during the porn wars, of course, of the 1970s and 1980s.
Porn wars.
Oh, yeah. So, like Gloria Steinem, Catherine McKinnon, Andrea Dworkin.
They were anti-porn?
Anti-porn and anti-prostitution.
Okay.
Yeah. And where they succeeded in criminalizing pornography in the name of protecting women, right? Their own books were legally defined as obscene for discussing lesbian sex or discussing the female body, because the line between obscenity and information about women's bodies, including contraception, has always been thin and porous.
Sure.
In fact, our first anti-pornography laws, the Comstock laws of 1870, were really targeted at criminalizing and confiscating information about contraception and information about abortion.
Like, that's not porn. Like, that's not... Yeah.
In the eyes of Anthony Comstock, it was. It's all obscene. Right?
But it's like a... And similar to FOSTA says, it's like a way to slip in all this other stuff. Like, this is how we're going to sell this to society. And then this is what we're actually going to push.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there are a lot of organizations out there that want to criminalize condoms and contraception, that want to criminalize access to abortion, reproductive care, that want to criminalize gender affirming care. And they want to eradicate prostitution. And they're framing that crusade in the name of protecting women. And that has a long history. We criminalized abortion the first time in this country in the 1890s, 1910s, in the name of protecting women from witch doctors, right? Like, this was I'm sorry, I get like very nerdy about this. I don't want to feel like I've cornered you at a party, which I've definitely done. But the American Medical Association, their first campaign was they wanted to criminalize abortion because they no longer wanted to compete with Black women who were not allowed to go to medical school. So who were midwives and also offering abortion care, right? As like, because people that can do midwifery, it's the same skill set, right?
Yeah.
And so they demonized abortion in
to demonize
order to
Black
criminalize
women.
This entire class of care providers.
Jesus Christ.
In order, and then like they made birth like a lot less safe for women.
You're going to do it in this position that doesn't even really support childbirth.
But more recently, I think it's really important to look at a lot of these anti-trafficking organizations, how they're funded, the kind of policies that they are pursuing, and who they're allied with. Tim Ballard is a fantastic example of this. He is the founder of, I'm going to tell you, don't worry about it. He is the founder of Operation Underground Railroad, and he was the subject of the film Sound of Freedom.
Okay.
It was like the modern, it was this big Hollywood hit because it was found, like, it came out and it was like, oh, it was a box office sensation.
Okay.
But it was a religiously funded film. And what he does is he has a lot of donors that are very interested in saving the girls, and they fund like military operations in countries that like don't have the kind of protections that would prevent a bunch of rich guys from getting together and putting together like a military operation.
Jesus Christ.
They have in the past used clairvoyance to find trafficking victims, and they go in and they like film all of this, and they quote unquote like rescue using guns and snipers and whatever.
Okay.
Children that they set up to be trafficked. So the way that they work is they go into these countries and they really push people where they're like, we're looking for kids. We're looking for kids. Bring us the kids. Bring us the kids. And so when that happens, they then send in like, you know, these like aggressively armed people because they want to play soldier, right? They want to play hero. They do that. And then they provide those kids with like zero services. They just like declare themselves heroes, and they're
And
donors.
were they actually children that were in harm's way? What were they?
So a lot of them, they're desperately poor kids, right? But and so it's
is this specifically related to potentially sex trafficking?
It's unclear because they are creating the demand that they are like supposedly.
Or like incentivizing the community, like are they bribing? We'll pay you to if you find.
You know what they're not doing?
Yeah.
They're not going to Epstein Island.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is really fucking terrifying right now.
And Tim Ballard is facing charges from 6 women who say that he sexually assaulted them as a part of these operations, because they would often go undercover as married couples. And Tim Ballard was apparently a method actor who just insisted on a lot of intimate, private sexual contact as a part of that deep undercover operation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So big PSA to research these anti-trafficking orgs. I've done a little bit of that myself, being like, oh, that's not what I thought. And I think it was it surrounding Fosta Sesta where it was just everywhere. These huge campaigns were TV ads that everyone's being trafficked. And
Amy Schumer did a PSA saying that it was as easy to order a child for sexual assault as it was to order a pizza, which is not.
Yeah. I don't know what the fuck she's up to.
I mean, I think, was it, I always get his first name. I think it was Will Vogt, one of the authors behind Project 2025, who sort of like openly admitted the way that a lot of this legislation is sold, right? The goals sound noble.
Yes.
But the outcome is nefarious, right? So like an age verification around pornography is a really good example of this, right? Sounds like a good idea, right? Nobody wants kids accessing porn, right? Pornhub doesn't want that. We don't want that. But what we know is that when you upload your ID to these sites, that is not safe.
I don't feel comfortable doing that.
Of course not, right?
I haven't done it.
Uploading your ID to access
where you see my weirdest history of search history.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want that.
Absolutely. No one does. And so what it does is it makes it impossible for operations that want to do this legally.
Yes.
It makes it impossible for them to do business. Right.
And it brings people to weirder parts of the internet to search for pornography.
Where a lot of this non-consensual child sexual assault material, right? Like that's where the deep, dark stuff is. It's on platforms that have no interest in following the rules anyway, right? That's not what you're finding on OnlyFans. That's not what you're finding on Pornhub. That's not what you're finding on these other sites. And so it's interesting that they are trying to put legal operators that are trying to follow the law out of business in order to
position it as we're just trying to be so ethical here.
We're trying to be ethical.
But I mean, it's my understanding that like with OnlyFans and porn, like there are a lot of checks and balances that have to happen there. Like on OnlyFans, if there's part of another person in a video, they have to also have an account. They also have to be ID and age verified. Like there are a lot of systems in place. I'm not saying that 0 videos on Pornhub involve trafficking, but like there is a lot, they have a lot of money and there's a lot of efforts to minimize that.
There's a lot of efforts.
So could you explain to the people the various types of sex work legalization and what that looks like, what the United States is currently in, how the Nordic model has not worked, all that stuff?
Sure. Yeah. So there's a fantastic TED Talk that I always like to direct people to.
Great.
That's called like What Do Sex Workers Actually Want? And it's by the one of the authors of Revolting Prostitutes, which is a fantastic book. Cool. And like if you're looking for a place to start on like what is the sex worker rights movement about, 10/10 recommend.
Okay, great.
But basically there are 4 ways to regulate or police prostitution. There's full criminalization, right, which we're familiar with. That's like
that means either party
buying, selling, and facilitating sex work is illegal, right? Then there is the Nordic model. This is a model that goes by many names because they've rebranded it many times.
Even the Nordic makes it sound good.
Oh, I know. Right.
It took me a while to figure. I thought like Nordic sounds like all those Nordic countries have their shit together.
That. Yeah, absolutely. A strong social safety net, right? Great jawbone. Like, what do we, listen. No, it's terrible. I'll just run through the partial list of names that I can remember, right? So partial decriminalization, the equality model, the feminist model, the entrapment model, the
equality model also sounds better.
The sex buyer model. The theory behind this law is that we can and should try to eradicate prostitution by criminalizing not the poor sellers who are universally female sex trafficking victims, but instead they're evil clients and facilitators, right? Pimps and Johns.
Okay.
Right. This model was originated in Sweden in 1999. It was then adopted by Norway and Iceland in 2009 and has since spread because it is a policy that is uniquely appealing to legislators. Yes. When you explain this to a normal person, they're like, oh, criminalizing half a transaction, that sounds dumb. And they're right. It's very, very bad. But when you explain this to a politician, they're like, that sounds like a compromise.
Like if we just kick half of it, it'll stop.
And what's interesting is that this model is actually worse for sex workers' safety and health than full criminalization.
Okay.
Yes.
Why is that?
Because it creates an antagonistic and asymmetric relationship between client and provider. When only the client is facing criminalization, they have no incentive and are actually actively disincentivized to provide verify any screening information at all.
Oh,
their
you're so right.
name, their ID, any information about a previous provider, because all of that could be evidence of a crime, right? So now as the provider,
that makes sense.
I'm twisting myself into knots to make them feel comfortable
and bringing down your threshold of where you may accept clients.
Everywhere that this model has been implemented, it forces sex workers to do more for less. You see an increase in unprotected sex. You see an increase in violence against sex workers. Sex workers become more isolated, and hostility about sex work increases, right?
Jeez.
There's also, because not only are clients criminalized, but also third-party facilitators, which this is sold to the public as like pimps, right? We're talking about pimps. No. We're talking about landlords. We're talking about roommates, right? We're talking about the person answering the phone. So this really isolates sex workers, and it makes us a lot more vulnerable, not only to exploitation within our communities, but to all sorts of stuff. So when Norway adopted this model in 2009, they started with what they called Operation Homelessness. So when they discovered that somebody was doing sex work, right, these poor trafficking victims, right, we really want to help them, right? Absolutely.
That's why we're here. Yeah.
That's totally the goal, for sure, right? So we're not going to arrest you. We're just going to let your landlord know that if you're not evicted within 48 hours, that we're going to charge you with pimping.
Charge who? Charge
the landlord.
The woman?
The landlord will be charged with pimping.
Who has no idea
for renting to a known sex worker. Once they become aware that the person that they are renting to is a sex worker, they have 48 hours
Which
to
is
evict.
insane because therefore you are literally criminalizing the sex worker as well. You're upheaving their life and ruining their 100%. Life if they no longer have a place to live. It's
getting evicted has never made anyone less vulnerable to exploitation.
Right.
And so what this does is it creates this like horrible tension, right? Where you either have to hide what you're doing from your landlord, or you're pushed into these incredibly exploitative situations where the landlord's like, well, I got to charge you 3x or demand social services, right? For the risk that I'm taking renting to you.
Oh my God.
Right.
And you were saying in something I was listening to, I can't remember which country the study was done in, but there were 11 years looked at where like this improved no conditions or did not decrease sex work.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So
it didn't work.
It didn't work. Yeah. So there have been several studies done. Northern Ireland adopted this. Again, everywhere that this model has been implemented, not only like does violence and STIs go up, but you actually don't see a long-term sustained reduction in demand. You see a short-term reduction in demand.
Because everyone's like probably recalibrating to this fear 100%. On both sides as a client and sex worker.
Which is really disruptive to the economy. And it creates it really makes the pool of clients less, how do I put this? It removes the pro-social rule-following folks from the economy, at least temporarily.
Right.
Yeah.
Which might be some really good clients.
Correct. Yeah. It removes the good guys. Yeah. From the pool. Yeah.
So has any type of criminalization or the Nordic model ever stopped?
There are two more. So that's full criminalization. That's decriminalization. Then there's legalization.
Okay.
This is the model that you see in Nevada and Amsterdam. This is, I like to refer to it as regulation, which I think is a more appropriate term. This is a model that really only benefits brothel owners because the whole concept
becomes corporate in a way. Yeah.
Right. You can totally do sex work, but only if you register. There's often, but not always, mandatory STI tests, but they contain and control where, when, how, under what circumstances you do it. So you are forced, if you want to work legally and get the legal protections of that, forced into working for a registered brothel under their rules and regulations. In Nevada, for example, if you want to work as a legally licensed sex worker, you have to register with the sheriff's department. That becomes a subpoenable thing about you for the rest of your life. You can imagine how this comes up in child custody cases, for example, right? When you work at a brothel, you are not allowed to leave the premises.
Yeah, I've heard that. Don't love that.
Right? You not only have to be subjected to, but you also have to pay, not just for an STI test, but specifically for the most invasive form of STI tests. So porn performers, they do STI testing all the time. They just go in, they get their blood drawn, that's fine.
Their exams.
Yeah, they're internal swabs because these laws were written too specifically in the 1970s. And you also have to work for some brothel. They're run by guys that are part of the good old boys network of Nevada because there's a limited number.
Other businesses and other things.
Right. And it's willfully difficult for workers to be able to distinguish the difference between house rules, county laws and state laws.
Yeah.
So is this Gus's rule?
Right.
Is this a county law? Is this a state law? It's very...
Sounds like it could be very close to coercive rules and regulations.
100%. There's
and
a
the
lot of force and
exams that
control.
you mentioned make me think of some of the pieces of your play where we're doing horrific exams on women for virginity and STI testing. And and so I think like the general public and even me before I started this podcast, I'm like, yeah, legalization is probably a good idea. Like that's kind of what one would think. But what do sex workers actually want?
And like often when people say, yes, let's legalize it,
they don't know what they're talking about.
They mean we should decriminalize it, right? Which is what sex workers want.
Important distinction.
When people say we should legalize it, they mean this shouldn't be a crime, which is what decriminalization is, right? So decriminalization removes criminal penalties for adult consensual sex workers without creating new regulatory structures that are unique to sex work, right? It doesn't legalize rape. It doesn't legalize trafficking. It doesn't legalize any crimes. It doesn't even legalize like quality of life, like drunk in public or littering ordinances. Like you can still get your neighbor if they're throwing rowdy parties at an unseemly hour. Like you're fine. But it doesn't force sex workers to work for other people. It doesn't force sex workers to put themselves on a stigmatized list. And it allows for sex workers to work collectively or together. Yeah.
And so what is the current state in the United States or in New York right now?
New York right now, sex work is illegal, buying, selling, and facilitating. There is a DA, Queens, I think, like unofficially decriminalized because the DA like deprioritized prosecution.
Okay, so that's what I've heard, that the actual seeking out or arresting of is not really happening unless it is. I don't know.
It gets complicated because we're often playing whack-a-mole with like what we're charging people with. So like prostitution arrests went down, but practicing massage without a license shot up like 800%. So, right, which doesn't that sound like just a made up crime? I just saw a celebrity
recently. It was like the Home Alone
the guy from Home Alone.
And I'm like, but I know, and I'm like, but wait, so it is illegal? Soliciting is? I think maybe he was.
Where was he? Was he in LA? Or
I think maybe.
Yeah.
But also like, God, that's somebody's like dirty laundry. Like, I just feel bad. That's humiliating.
It's absolutely humiliating. And what he was doing absolutely should not have been a crime. Like there's no evidence there is no evidence to suggest that he was coercing anyone or that he was approaching a minor or that he was engaging in anything like that would even be considered antisocial behavior, right? This is a dude who was approaching somebody for advertised sexual services, trying to pay a professional.
I wonder if it was leaked and then he got in trouble, or I don't know, because he's famous.
I don't have any details about like how this thing went down or like how he was caught. I mean, I know how a lot of these happen is that like an undercover cop is like posing as a sex worker and like gets people.
Can our money please fucking go somewhere else?
The other way that this is done is even worse, which is police officers posing as clients.
Yeah, that's what I was
getting
gonna ask about.
Full services. And then arresting the provider after the session. Yeah. Your taxpayer dollars are in fact, absolutely. That is a real thing that is often happening.
That should be illegal.
That
is really fucked up.
And we are actually fighting to make that illegal.
I would love to help.
In New York. Yes. There is a
what
bill.
Is that called? That type of like.
I mean, I think it should be called rape, but yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's called like, sexual contact. Well, the law would make sexual contact with somebody that you're investigating illegal.
I can't even process this information. Is the justification like, well, it can't actually be they are being paid for sex unless they're paid for sex.
Yeah. And cops also want to like get the rocks off, right? They saw LA Confidential and then they wanted to make it like.
But I've heard that like just giving somebody money and then not starting, but like the initiation of some type of sexual contact, then they could arrest them right there. Like,
or the negotiation.
Yes,
I mean, like,
yes.
I mean, we shouldn't be prosecuting people for this at all, but like, there's definitely enough before
that's gross.
The act is completed. Yeah, but
and how humiliating for the sex workers.
Correct. Often these women are marched in their lingerie in front of like perp walks. Like you see a lot of these photos. Like it's absolutely
And so this might not be happening in New York much, but this is happening in other states?
This is absolutely happening in other states.
Okay.
Yeah. It is happening in New York. It's not happening in Queens right
interesting.
now.
Yeah. Okay. Could you talk a little bit about the different types of full service sex work? Because I do think that there's a difference between being a high-end escort and street-based providers and the different backgrounds that they may have.
Sure.
I mean, I think I'm, just predominantly sharing kind of one experience on the podcast when I interview women, which is this more, I didn't have anything bad happen. It was a good experience overall, and high-end escort.
All of my experiences with sexual violence have been in my recreational sex life, for sure. I have not faced violence at the hands of a client, which is not to say that I have not faced sexual violence.
Sure.
As I said earlier, right? Like I think the food and bev industry is a really good
that was great
counterexample, right? When you are interviewing celebrity executive chefs, they have a different educational, personal background than, like migrant busboys. Like the same spectrum of experiences exist in sex work.
Yes.
And there are a lot of waitresses that show up every day that have good and bad and boring and stressful days that would not be waiting tables unless they were being paid, but are fine waiting tables to be paid and would rather be waiting tables than doing one of the other jobs that could pay them, like $150, $200 a day, or like whatever it is. So like there's a very big middle class of sex. It's not
definitely
a clear distinction between people making $50,000 an hour and people who but the population of what's happening in the global South in mines and in the textile industry and with our phone, it's horrific.
Sure.
And sex work is no exception. USAID, we defunded a lot of our anti-HIV prevention stuff. Huge part of that was giving out condoms and lube, which prevents HIV by preventing abrasions that make people more vulnerable to that. Uganda was a place that has a prevalence of HIV, and that completely dried up. Condoms are actually difficult to manufacture locally and difficult to distribute because they are associated with sex work and the LGBT community, which is also a criminalized class, right? So
in Uganda.
In Uganda, right. So it's...
Are we talking about pre-PrEP prevention stuff?
Yeah, so that is also very, very difficult to get, right?
Sure.
Because of the criminalization and the stigma. So right now, because condoms are difficult to get, they are more expensive. And unprotected sex pays more than protected sex. So sex workers...
Are we talking about sex work in Uganda?
Sex work in Uganda.
Okay.
So right now, sex workers are facing this terrible choice that they have to pay an exorbitant amount for condoms that then reduce
what they make.
Desperate people do desperate things.
Yeah.
Right. That's not to say that sex in exchange for money or something of value is inherently violent, coercive, or dangerous.
Yeah.
But vulnerable people are exploitable in every industry.
Yeah.
And sex work is no exception to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard that when there are arrests made, that it is more street-based sex workers.
Of course. Yeah. Because so much of the policing of prostitution is about policing visible poverty, right? There's a lot of xenophobia around the policing of prostitution. That's it's as true of Norway as it is here.
Sure.
And if you look at the arrest of, that's also true when you talk about arresting clients.
Yes,
we're not going after the Epstein class. There was that famous arrest of, Robert Kraft in 2018, but the overwhelming majority of clients who are arrested are Black and brown people who are like making under the poverty line, who are often trying to pay for sexual services for the first time.
Right. Well, on that note, let's switch it up a little bit.
Sure.
Let's get into some of your favorite naughty history moments, sex workers. One of the little things that I nerded out about this one time, I was researching like sex workers in gold mining towns specifically. Yeah. I found that really fascinating because it was like, yes, sex workers settled the West. There you go. I mean, you have all of these men in harsh working conditions, 100%. Like we were just talking about, that are making a lot of money.
Yep.
And the brothels moved in really, really quick. And they were miners,
it's true of lumberjacks. It's true of soldiers. Absolutely. When you have a concentrated group of men who are being paid in wages,
not paying rent, bills.
Sex workers about, for sure. We are often the first women to arrive in we're often the first white women to arrive in settlements. And we are often the first folks to insist on things like running water and schools.
Yes, please.
And the other niceties. So we often act as a civilizing force in the nice way. So and brothels serve a multitude of like different community functions. So these are often gathering spaces. But if you look at the history of the West, right, like, you know, Alaska, Colorado, Texas, Montana, the Dakotas, sex workers are also libraries, infirmaries, theaters, gathering spaces. Sometimes they operate as banks, like brothels.
Sure, they had a lot of money.
Absolutely.
Loans. You want a loan? Go ask the lady.
Absolutely.
Very matriarchal.
Yeah. Lou Graham actually was a very well-known and successful madam in Seattle. And she bailed the city out after the like 18 crisis and sort of single-handedly funded the public school district there. So, yeah. Seattle, she's like a founding mother of Seattle.
Mm-hmm. That's fucking crazy. Mm-hmm. You also mentioned in your show the first woman to ever run for president was a sex worker.
Victoria Woodhull.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Don't think many people have heard that.
Yeah. Well, she was erased from our history by her own contemporaries. So, you know, the suffragists that we learned about in school, like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, like these are the names that might be more familiar to your listeners. They left her out of our history because she was a sex worker. And they didn't want the suffrage movement or feminism associated. Exactly. But she was an incredible woman. She was born into poverty in Ohio. She ended up running her own newspaper. She was the first woman to run a brokerage firm on Wall Street. She was the first woman to...
That's fucking crazy.
I know, right? The first woman to address Congress on the issue of suffrage. And she announced her candidacy in 1870. And Anthony Comstock, right, the guy that conflated contraception with obscenity, the guy that wrote the Comstock laws that criminalized obscenity and information about contraception, built his career going after her, ran her out of the country. She had to flee to England. And
because of sex work?
Because of Anthony Comstock's law and the way that she was being targeted and harassed. Of course, like, her whole thing.
Yeah.
50 years later, he did the same thing to Margaret Sanger, who founded Planned Parenthood, using the same laws.
Oh, boy.
This is a guy who, like, single-handedly delayed the widespread availability of birth control in this country.
Wow.
Yeah, and he built his career going after Victoria Woodhull.
What would women do before condoms were readily available and birth control? How would they prevent pregnancy?
Yeah, sex workers were real innovators on contraception.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
So there was definitely a lot of creative use of oral or like other, you know, like, wouldn't it be more exciting if you came somewhere else?
Yeah.
For sure. So, you know, a little charm.
Didn't just start with porn, you guys.
Hilarious. Yeah. But also acidity, right? So like increasing the acidic environment is a pretty effective form of contraception. Right?
Yeah, there is a birth control that does that. I think the gel stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That's So you can do that with lemon rinds and orange rinds and like where that stuff is available. You can do that with sponges. So you can create like physical barriers. There's a lot of methods that have been lost to history. But
women
brothels
have always found a way.
Were full of Ben Franklin's first, he published a cookbook that included not one, but 2 recipes for at-home abortions.
What?
In Benjamin Franklin, founding father, beloved figure, and notorious client of sex workers, included, so this was not only not stigmatized, but this was just sort of a part of...
Yeah, this is how you
absolutely. And so sex workers are trading this information, right? Brothels are a fantastic incubator for where this information will be passed on from one person to another.
Yeah.
And so sex workers are a lot safer and better equipped at preventing STIs and preventing unwanted pregnancies than, say, isolated domestic workers who are unsuccessfully staving off advances from their employer. Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. What's the Benjamin Franklin lore? What's his lore? He just loves sex workers.
Yeah, he loved sex workers. Yeah, he wrote about
politicians like sex workers.
Yeah.
What
they
a
go
concept.
together. Not like soldiers do, but close.
In the gold mining research I was doing, I was learning about these tunnels that were dug, and they were literally
in Pendleton, Oregon.
I'm not sure where it was.
Sure.
I think it was maybe Montana or something, but it was there was a tunnel built so that men could escape the brothel if their wives found them. And then there was one situation where there was a tunnel dug up into the politician's home.
Hilarious.
And it's this shit is just never.
Yeah. And I'm sure prohibition, the history of prohibition and prostitution also goes together.
Yes,
for sure.
Yes. I would love to talk a little bit, speaking of politicians. I was listening to part of your episode about Melania Trump. Is she a sex worker? And something that I've done past episodes on before is this weird gray area where it's we know it's fucking transactional, but it's not explicit. And maybe they weren't hired from an ad, but I still look at all of that as sex work. I'm
is a courtesan to the king a sex worker, right? She's got one client. She's got an official title at court. She's not a wife. She's being paid a salary.
This was part of England or what? What
so
is
many
actual?
Courts.
Okay,
so many courts, right?
Yeah.
Have
a king would have an official courtesan, but it was not his queen,
not
or his wife,
queen, not his queen.
But he was maybe married to a queen.
Of course, yeah. There's a role for a queen,
and everyone knew he had a courtesan. That was okay.
The king's consort, yes, absolutely.
Okay, this is kind of new. Okay,
yeah, absolutely. So it's an official. So it comes with official duties outside of pleasing the king.
Okay.
Like everyone else at court, they serve at the pleasure of the king, right? A little bit more literally. But they also throw parties. They're also responsible for entertainment. They're often patrons of the arts. They often handle other things. So it's interesting, how much of that is literally the sex. And none of that prevents the king from going to the brothel. You know what I mean? So it's it all exists simultaneously.
And we still see that, that basic model with,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is marrying for money sex work?
That is a good fucking question.
Right. I mean, look.
I think it's nuanced.
Is working at Hooters a form of sex work?
Right.
As opposed to any other service industry job. Is a service industry job, as being a bartender, sex work? If you're a hot chick. Or if your sex magic energy is a part of your thing. They're absolutely
the bottle service girls. It's there is such a spectrum, and a lot is getting brought into the word sex work now, OnlyFans. And I always try to distinguish that because I think there is such a difference.
Why
distinguish?
Yeah. Why are you so interested in? Why do the lines matter to you?
For me, if I'm talking to somebody, I think there's a difference between in-person sex work, full service sex work, and OnlyFans.
Are you worried about stolen valor?
I don't know what that is.
Stolen valor is something that, if you are a soldier that never saw combat, and then you're just in a bar running your mouth about being a veteran, and you just sort of went to basic, and then
it's more of if an OnlyFans girl, if she doesn't tell me what she does, and she says I'm a sex worker, I'm just curious to know.
I am I'm a political operative. I am interested in building the largest possible coalition of sex workers and advocates and allies.
Yeah.
I believe that we all know a sex worker. And I also believe that whether you are doing legal, online, super privileged sex work, or you are in a very desperate, violent situation, we all suffer under the same stigma. It doesn't matter if you're selling anonymous feet pics or if you're being like coerced into unprotected sex. People can take your kids away by calling you a whore. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where can people find you?
Sure.
We already did that, but again.
I mean, yeah, no, and I
and
do
the website as well.
I do a lot of stuff. So
yes, she does. This will probably come out in April, so I don't know where that lands in your tour, but
yeah, I host the Oldest Profession podcast, where every episode we do a deep dive into a different person or moment or subject that's important to sex worker rights history.
Yes.
I tour with a live show, also called The Oldest Profession, that you should definitely check out. All of those tour dates are available at theoldestprofession.org. We send out a newsletter every Friday. That's a roundup of sex worker rights related news.
Cool.
In addition to all of my upcoming tour dates and any new episodes. And you can sign up for that at oldprosonline.org.
Awesome.
And you can follow Old Pros and all of the cool stuff that we do. Old Pros is a nonprofit media organization that uses storytelling to advocate for sex worker rights. And you can find out all of our stuff at Old Pros Online.
Cool. How could I get involved or somebody get involved that wants to like help with pushing through some of this legislation? You talked about like the thing happening in New York, local.
Yeah, fantastic.
How can we show up in person?
Great place to start is signing up for our newsletter. Yeah. So we sent out a push about an upcoming lobbying day that's happening here, where a lot of sex workers are like coming from New York to Albany to advocate for their legislators. So we send out like information about that. You can also follow us. You can follow us on social media. I really encourage that. And we're a sex worker rights organization. And so if you want to hear about things in a timely way, sign up for our newsletter so that we can communicate with you.
Social's always like,
do not let the algorithm decide when or if you hear from us, please.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's a like lobbying day coming up, and we elevate a lot of that from different sex worker rights organizations that we're in touch with, right? So not just
I noticed on your website. All of them. Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah, and so part of that is like the way that we tour, right? So every city or country that I go to, we connect to different sex worker organizations, and now we're in touch, right?
Yeah.
And so we hear about the work that they're doing, like all of the initiatives that they're involved in, and then we try to tell our audience about that.
Yeah.
So we really are connected to the global sex worker rights movement.
Amazing.
So we're a pretty good hub if like you want to get involved in your local organization.
Where to start?
Start with us and then connect to your local sex worker organizers who will often direct you to specific bills, specific lobbying days. And another great way to get involved is to like, especially if you're not a sex worker and there's no like fear of you like having to deal with any of that stigma, letting your community, your neighbors, and your legislators know that you stand with sex workers because you know that it's an anti-trafficking policy it's great. It signals to all of the sex workers in your life that you're a safe person and an ally, and it helps create a community that is just safer for us to move in, because changing the narrative is a really, really important and necessary step to get to better policy on this issue.
Yes. And that requires sex workers and non-sex workers. Yep.
To speak up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, my dear.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify, Apple, and or YouTube, as well as on Instagram at Seggs Talk Radio. That's Seggs, Seggs. And before you go, head over to testy.co to join the waitlist for our 2026 launch. We are reinventing same-day walk-in STI testing nationwide.